The room was a cathedral of whispers, where the air clung heavy with the scent of old lavender and forgotten promises. Eleanor Grayson, her eyes clouded like frosted glass, sat in her wicker chair, fingers trembling as they traced the edges of a yellowed envelope. She had waited 60 years for this moment, and now it was here too late, or perhaps just in time. The young nurse, Clara, barely 20, stood by the window, her crisp white uniform a stark contrast to the room's faded tapestry. She held the envelope with reverence, as if it were a relic from a world she'd never know. Eleanor's voice, frail but resolute, broke the silence. "Read it to me, child. Every word. Don't leave anything out." 60 years ago, Eleanor had been a girl of 19, her heart a wild thing, tethered to a man named Thomas. He was a soldier, broad-shouldered and quiet, with eyes that held the sea. They'd met in the summer of 1965, under a willow tree by the river, where the world seemed to pause just for them. He'd promised to write, to return, to build a life together. But the war had other plans, and Thomas never came back. The letters stopped, and Eleanor's heart, once a vibrant flame, dimmed to embers. Clara's fingers hesitated over the envelope seal. It was postmarked 1965, the ink smudged but legible, addressed to Eleanor in a hand that shook with urgency. "Are you sure, Mrs. Grayson?" Clara asked, her voice soft, sensing the weight of what she held. Eleanor nodded, her lips a thin line of determination. "I've waited long enough." The letter began simply, in Thomas's familiar scrawl, "My dearest Ellie, if you're reading this, I'm already gone." Clara's voice faltered as she read, and Eleanor's breath hitched. The words were a bridge to a past she'd buried, each sentence a stone unturned. Thomas wrote of the battlefield, of fear that gnawed like hunger, of a love that burned brighter than the shells bursting around him. He spoke of a promise he'd made to himself to survive, to find her, to marry her under that same willow tree. Clara paused, glancing at Eleanor, whose eyes, though blind, seemed to see something far beyond the room. "Keep going," Eleanor whispered, her voice a thread of steel. The letter turned darker, describing a wound, a hospital tent, and a chaplain who promised to send this final note. "I'm sorry, Ellie. I tried to come back to you." Clara's voice broke, and she wiped a tear, but Eleanor remained still, her face a map of grief and grace. The room felt smaller now, the walls closing in with the weight of Thomas's words. Clara reached the end. "If I don't make it, know that I loved you every moment. Find happiness, Ellie. Live for us both." The signature was a scrawl, as if the pen had slipped from his hand. Silence fell, heavy as a storm cloud, and Clara folded the letter, her hands trembling. Eleanor leaned back, her fingers clutching the arms of her chair. "All these years," she murmured, "I thought he'd forgotten me." Clara knelt beside her, unsure of what to say. The old woman's face was a paradox, grief carved deep, yet softened by a strange peace. "He never stopped loving you," Clara said, her voice barely above a whisper. But then, a twist of sound at the door. It creaked open, revealing an older man, his face weathered like driftwood, his eyes wide with something akin to fear. "Mrs. Grayson?" he said, his voice rough with age. Clara stood, startled, as Eleanor turned her head toward the sound. "Who's there?" she asked, her voice sharp with hope and dread. The man stepped forward, his hands clutching a worn cap. "My name's Samuel. I knew Thomas. I was with him when he wrote that letter." Clara's heart skipped, and Eleanor's breath caught. Samuel's eyes glistened as he continued. "He gave me something for you, all those years ago. I've been looking for you ever since." Samuel reached into his coat, pulling out a small, tarnished locket. Clara took it, describing it to Eleanor, a heart-shaped pendant, engraved with a willow tree. Inside was a tiny photograph of a young Eleanor, laughing, her eyes bright with life. "He carried this," Samuel said. "He said it kept him going." Eleanor's fingers closed around the locket, her breath a shudder. "Why now?" she asked, her voice breaking. Samuel's gaze dropped. "I was a coward. I survived the war, but I couldn't face you, knowing he didn't make it. I thought you'd hate me for living when he didn't." Clara watched, her heart aching, as Eleanor reached out, her hand finding Samuel's. "I don't hate you," she said softly. "You brought him back to me, in a way." The room was alive with emotion, a tapestry of loss and redemption woven in the space between them. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light through the window, Eleanor held the locket close, her lips whispering Thomas's name. Clara sat quietly, feeling the weight of a story she'd only begun to understand. Samuel lingered, his presence a bridge between past and present, a reminder that some promises endure beyond a lifetime. The locket felt warm in Eleanor's hands, as if it carried the heat of Thomas's heart from all those years ago. She sat in silence, her fingers tracing the willow tree engraving, while Clara watched, her own heart heavy with the story unfolding before her. Samuel stood by the door, his shoulders hunched, as if the weight of decades pressed down on him. Clara broke the silence, her voice gentle but curious. "Mr. Samuel, how did you find Mrs. Grayson after all this time?" Samuel's eyes flickered to Eleanor, then to the floor. "It wasn't easy," he said, his voice rough like gravel. "After the war, I wandered. Guilt kept me moving. But I never forgot Thomas's last words, find Ellie. Give her the locket. I spent years searching, following old addresses, asking questions. Found her name in a hospital record a month ago." Eleanor's head tilted, her sightless eyes searching the air. "You carried this burden all these years?" she asked. Samuel nodded, though she couldn't see it. "I owed him that much. He saved my life once, pulled me from a ditch when the shells were falling. I couldn't save him, but I could keep his promise." Clara felt a pang of awe. The room seemed to hum with the ghosts of choices made and unmade. She glanced at Eleanor, whose face was a canvas of emotions, grief, gratitude, and something softer, like forgiveness. "What was he like, Samuel?" Eleanor asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "In those last days?" Samuel hesitated, his hands twisting the cap. "Thomas was steady. Even when the world was falling apart, he'd talk about you. Said you were his anchor. He'd hum that song you liked, Moon River, wasn't it, to keep the fear at bay?" Eleanor's lips curved into a faint smile, her fingers tightening around the locket. "He always loved that song," she murmured. Clara, sensing the moment's fragility, offered to make tea, needing a moment to process the weight of it all. As she moved to the small kitchenette, she overheard Samuel's voice drop lower. "There's something else, Mrs. Grayson. Something I didn't tell you." Clara paused, her hand on the kettle, her heart racing. Another twist, another layer to this story. Eleanor's breath caught. "What is it?" she asked, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Samuel stepped closer, his voice thick with emotion. "Thomas had a daughter. You have a granddaughter." The words landed like a stone in still water, rippling through the room. Clara froze, the kettle forgotten, her eyes darting to Eleanor. "A granddaughter?" Eleanor's voice was a whisper, fragile as glass. Samuel nodded, his face etched with regret. "Her name's Lily. She was born after Thomas shipped out. Her mother, your friend, Margaret, kept it quiet. Thought it'd hurt you more to know. I only found out a few years ago, tracked Lily down. She's in her 50s now, lives a few towns over." Eleanor's hands shook, the locket slipping to her lap. "Why didn't Margaret tell me?" she asked, her voice breaking. Samuel knelt beside her, his voice soft. "She thought you'd moved on, didn't want to reopen the wound. But Lily, she's got Thomas's eyes. And his stubbornness." Clara returned, setting the tea tray down, her mind reeling. Eleanor's face was a storm of emotion, shock, joy, and a deep, aching loss for time stolen. "Does she know about me?" Eleanor asked. Samuel shook his head. "Not yet. I wanted to find you first, make sure it was right to tell her." The room fell silent, save for the soft ticking of a clock. Clara watched Eleanor, whose fingers found the locket again, as if it were a lifeline. "I want to meet her," Eleanor said finally, her voice firm. "Please, Samuel, bring her to me." Samuel nodded, his eyes glistening. "I will. I promise." As night fell, the room glowed with the soft light of a single lamp. Clara sat with Eleanor, reading the letter again at her request, each word a thread weaving past and present. Samuel left to make arrangements, his steps heavy but purposeful. Eleanor held the locket close, whispering to it as if Thomas could hear her. "You left me a piece of you," she said, her voice a mix of sorrow and wonder. Clara felt like an intruder in this sacred moment, yet she couldn't look away. The story was far from over, and she sensed that Lily's arrival would change everything. The weight of 60 years of love and loss hung in the air, a reminder that some promises endure, even when hope seems lost. The morning sun filtered through the lace curtains, casting delicate shadows across Eleanor's room. She sat in her wicker chair, the locket now a constant companion around her neck, its weight both a comfort and a reminder. Clara, preparing tea, noticed Eleanor's hands were steadier today, as if the hope of meeting Lily had anchored her trembling heart. Samuel had promised to return with Lily by noon. Clara watched Eleanor closely, noting the way her lips moved silently, perhaps rehearsing words for a granddaughter she'd never known. "Are you nervous, Mrs. Grayson?" Clara asked, setting a cup of chamomile tea beside her. Eleanor's smile was faint but warm. Nervous, excited, terrified all at once. "What do you say to a piece of your heart you didn't know existed?" Clara didn't have an answer, but she squeezed Eleanor's hand, feeling the fragility of her bones and the strength of her spirit. The clock struck 11, and the air grew thick with anticipation. Clara busied herself tidying the room, but her eyes kept darting to the door, waiting for Samuel's knock. When it came, it was soft, almost hesitant. Clara opened the door to find Samuel, his face lined with fatigue but bright with purpose. Beside him stood a woman in her 50s, her dark hair streaked with gray, her eyes a striking blue Thomas's eyes. Lily's expression was guarded, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "This is Lily," Samuel said, his voice gentle. "Lily, this is Clara and Mrs. Grayson." Eleanor turned toward the sound, her breath catching. "Lily," she whispered, her voice trembling with a lifetime of longing. Lily stepped forward, her own voice unsteady. "Mrs. Grayson, I didn't know about you until Samuel found me. I didn't know about my father." The room seemed to hold its breath as Eleanor reached out, her hands searching the air. Lily hesitated, then took them, her touch cautious but warm. "You look like him," Eleanor said, her voice breaking. "I can't see you, but I feel him in you." Lily's eyes filled with tears, and she knelt beside Eleanor, their hands still clasped. Clara stepped back, her throat tight, as Samuel recounted how he'd found Lily working as a librarian in a nearby town. Lily spoke softly, her voice laced with awe. "My mother told me my father died in the war, but she never spoke of you. I grew up wondering who he was, what he loved." She paused, her voice cracking. "Now I know he loved you." Eleanor's face crumpled, and she pulled Lily closer, their foreheads touching. "You're his gift to me," she whispered. Clara wiped her eyes, feeling the weight of a reunion 60 years in the making. But then, another twist. Lily reached into her bag, pulling out a small, leather-bound journal. "Samuel gave me this," she said. "It was my father's. He wrote about you." Clara's heart skipped as Lily opened the journal, its pages brittle but intact. "Would you like me to read it?" Lily asked. Eleanor nodded, her breath shallow. Lily's voice was steady as she began, reading Thomas's words from the war sketches of moments with Eleanor, dreams of a future they'd never have. "Ellie, you're my reason to keep going. Every sunrise reminds me of your smile." The words were a knife and a balm, cutting through Eleanor's grief while healing something deep within. Clara watched, her heart aching, as Lily's voice grew thick with emotion. Samuel stood silently, his eyes distant, as if seeing Thomas in the trenches again. The journal ended with a final entry. "If I don't make it, find Ellie. Tell her I'll love her always." Eleanor wept openly now, her hands clutching Lily's. "He never stopped," she said, her voice a mix of pain and joy. Lily nodded, her own tears falling. "Neither will I," she said. "I want to know you, grandmother. I want to know everything." As the afternoon sun bathed the room in gold, Clara felt like a witness to a miracle. Eleanor and Lily sat together, their voices soft, weaving a new thread in a story long thought finished. Samuel lingered, his role as messenger complete, yet his presence a quiet anchor. Days turned into weeks, and Eleanor's room became a haven for stories. Lily visited daily, her presence a light in the dimness of Eleanor's world. They sat together, piecing together a past neither had fully known. Eleanor sharing memories of Thomas's laugh, his love for stargazing, while Lily offered glimpses of her own life, shaped by a father she'd never met. Clara watched this bond grow, her role as nurse shifting to something deeper, a keeper of their story. She'd read Thomas's journal to them when Eleanor's energy waned, her voice carrying his words like a bridge across time. Each entry was a revelation, a testament to a love that had defied war and death. But Clara sensed something unspoken in Eleanor, a quiet resolve forming beneath her grief. One evening, as rain pattered against the window, Eleanor asked Lily to take her to the river where she and Thomas had fallen in love. "I want to feel it again," Eleanor said, her voice firm. Lily hesitated, glancing at Clara, who nodded. "I'll come too," Clara said, sensing the importance of this pilgrimage. The journey was slow, Eleanor's steps frail but determined, guided by Lily and Clara. The riverbank was much as Eleanor remembered, though the willow tree was gnarled now, its branches heavy with time. Eleanor stood beneath it, the locket around her neck glinting in the fading light. "This is where he proposed," she said, her voice thick. "He carved our initials here." Lily searched the trunk, her fingers finding the faint outline of E and T, weathered but enduring. She traced it, her eyes glistening. "He's still here," she whispered. Eleanor nodded, her sightless eyes turned toward the river's murmur. "He always will be." But then, a final twist. Clara noticed a small, hidden carving below the initials, a heart, enclosing the word Lily. Eleanor's breath caught as Clara described it. "He knew," Eleanor said, her voice trembling. "Somehow he knew about you." Lily's hand covered her mouth, her tears falling freely. "He named me," she said, her voice breaking. The three women stood in silence, the river's song weaving through their shared grief and love. Eleanor reached for Lily's hand, then Clara's, forming a circle under the willow's shade. "I've lived for this," Eleanor said, her voice steady now. "To know you, Lily. To know he left me you." Clara felt the weight of the moment, a culmination of 60 years of waiting. She realized her role wasn't just to read a letter or tend to an old woman, it was to witness a legacy reborn. Lily promised to keep coming, to bring her own children one day, to tell them of Thomas and Eleanor. As they returned to the house, Eleanor's steps were lighter, her face radiant despite her blindness. Clara carried the journal, its pages a testament to a love that had outlasted time. The locket gleamed against Eleanor's chest, a symbol of promises kept. In the quiet of the night, Clara sat by Eleanor's side, listening to her soft breathing. The story wasn't over, it lived in Lily, in the journal, in the willow tree's shadow. And Clara knew, as she watched the stars through the window, that she'd been changed by it too.